Okay,
She is.
Vacation.
welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the March 1st, the sign of spring, meeting of the Economic Development Commission. And we'll begin by reviewing and hopefully approving the minutes of the last meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any corrections, additions, deletions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Bless you.
Before we go on to the outdoor dining orders, just a little housekeeping item. Sean brought to my attention that we had set the July meeting for July 5, which is the first Friday of the month, which is also the day after the holiday. And so I wanted to offer you the opportunity to choose either keep it on that date or we could move it to the day before the 4th on Wednesday the 3rd, or we can move it to Friday the 12th.
Can I throw a curveball at you? We took a poll of City Hall employees for a half-day floating holiday, and overwhelmingly, people picked July 5th, so the building will be closed.
Okay, well, I'm
If
pretty
you
good.
choose
Most
to
people
meet, we
aren't
can
going to
meet
want to
at
choose
an
that.
alternative location. Okay.
So, July 3rd or July 12th, do we have a preference?
I don't have a strong preference.
July 3rd.
Vote third. If no one's going to throw one out there, I'll go with the third.
I'll vote 12th.
Who's the tiebreaker?
All right, so,
Here.
I'm not a voting member, so
It's on the 3rd, and I have to go to Boston, so
all right, well,
I don't care. I can do either.
okay. I would say the 3rd.
Third works.
Okay, then we'll move it to 3rd, assuming you can get the room on that day.
I'll give it a shot.
Are you around? You're not on vacation or anything?
Night.
The 3rd?
I'm around.
Okay.
everyone's going to come for the fireworks that night.
All right, so we'll, John will send out another save the date invitation for you. Now, Sean, do you want to give us a summary of the status of the outdoor dining and then your report?
Sure. So the outdoor dining ordinance passed on the meeting on the 20th, and you may have also seen that the fee committee came back and proposed $5 a square foot for cost with a minimum fee of $750, and that also passed the city council. So that's the number, and the goal was to have one number for all, I guess, city parking spaces and property. And the applications are opening hopefully today. That was where the Planning and Sustainability Department was hoping to have the applications open today. Everything else that we've seen over the months is in the ordinance. It did not get changed. The 20th was the third and final reading and the vote. So,
I'm assuming that's on the online.
yes. Yes.
Was there any, there are no charges for the Jersey barriers? Or
No. It's basically the fee committee set the one flat fee.
Okay.
Sean, how will that compare to the revenue raised last year on a per applicant basis?
I think that was the fee last year. I think $5 was the ultimate.
$5 per square.
Per square foot.
$5 per square foot, but it was $1,500 a parking space. So for many people using that number, it's going to go down. The reflection of the fee, at least for this current year, would be recognizing that some people have to buy new furniture to comply, may have to put in the platforms to create accessibility. So
They estimate a platform at $1,300 and X dollars per parking space. So the fee came down if you look at just the parking spaces, but they're going to have an expenditure of, call it $1,400 to create that platform.
and then the thought was the fee committee would reevaluate next year.
Right.
Good.
You might recall there were 30, I believe there were 30 parking spaces reserved, used last year for outdoor dining, 30, which is down significantly from the year before and the year before. So what the goal was to have, to let businesses know what to expect. They now know what to expect. and including the review every year by the fee committee. But I also think a lot of the conversation at the city council meeting was, yes, there may be some initial investment on the part of a restaurant, but these fees are set to not be an impediment to someone choosing to offer outdoor dining. They're low enough that it should not be an impediment. That's what I recall from the conversation. But it's all out there on the recording if you want to hear how the councilors talked about it.
They also talked about the increase in parking revenue during the outdoor dining season and seeing that as, you know, though you're losing a parking space, you might not actually be losing that parking revenue in the way that
Yep.
that solid number is put.
How would you ever prove that?
It's that people don't go home, they go and park in the garage.
No, but
Park somewhere.
I'm saying it's a summer season, so you're going to have more people downtown anyway, so how could you ever
No, it's
show?
like anecdotally, they're saying the outdoor dining brings people to downtown. People like seeing it downtown. So, that was part of the fee committee
Yeah.
discussion.
Did anybody attend the fee committee meeting? Not the city council, but the fee committee one? So it's, would you like to, this is Jane Farini, for those who don't know.
You attended, yeah.
So maybe you can clarify this. So I understood from Councilor Tabor's comments at the city council meeting that it was taken into consideration the cost of this setup. But I'm guessing if the platform is typically going to cost $1,300, that's going to have to be paid every year because you're not going to be able to have a platform that.
Well, they do, they say
You might be
they
able to.
reuse them.
You might be able to.
I think that was
I-
the
the goat
that
does,
they
I
would
think.
be able to reuse them.
Rosa reuses theirs. Goats lasted 3 years, and last year, I mean, they're not coming back, but last year they did build a new one. They got 3 years out of it. So.
Okay, all right. But it's your sense that this isn't meant to just be an initial year for these restaurants. This is now going to be the going rate, so to speak, from year
I
to year.
think they were pretty clear that they wanted, as Sean mentioned, to make it accessible and affordable, but they recognized that the platform was an additional cost and sort of a one-time this year, but that the fees would be looked at annually. And so my sense was that it would be looked at a little differently next year, once those platforms have been constructed and presumably reused, and so therefore not a cost next year. That was the sense that I got from the fee committee when they were discussing it amongst themselves.
I only zoomed in, but that's the sense I got, that it would be a different conversation next year.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions on the outdoor dining?
Let's say Assistant Mayor Kelly is on the Zoom if there's anything.
Hello, everyone. I'm just headed to the airport, so I'm on the Zoom.
Want to go next?
Would you like to add anything on the outdoor dining?
No, I would just add that I concur with Attorney Farini and that my understanding from the fee committee is that they are going to be looked at yearly. And so, I would assume that we would see an increase in that. I would say when asked for kind of direct numbers of how much it costs to be put out, it was a little bit hard for DPW to say 100% this would cover the cost because we own the barriers. It really depends on staffing needs, things like that. So I think that's where a little bit different from the EDC recommendation of kind of recouping the cost. I think when it came down to getting a finite number, it was a little bit hard to be concrete on that. But again, I would assume that we would see a slight increase next year to kind of stabilize out that fee.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a favor, since Jane's with us already, and I know she's got some other irons in the fire, could we take Jane out of turn?
Oh, sure. So you've got to be somewhere?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm.
Holding down the wheel for it.
Can I ask one more question on outdoor dining?
Yes.
At the appropriate time, can we just get a report back on like applicants, types of applicants, new versus existing, just to understand if anything in the ordinance changes who applies?
Sure, for this coming season?
Yeah, whenever the closing period is, we don't need it.
May 3rd will be a good indicator of
Okay.
how many people have
Yeah,
jumped
that would
in
be
because
good
the
for that
date
meeting.
of open is May 1st.
And I can add to that, the encumbrance permit, the outdoor dining encumbrance permit that the planning department is going live in probably a few minutes. They have amended it so they can track a little bit better relative to parking spaces versus sidewalks versus, so they'll be able to break down some of that data. So that was a nice new feature by revising the application. They'll be able to have a little bit better data as to what was actually used.
Excellent.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll suspend the current order of the agenda to allow Jane to fill us in on this year's legislative program.
And so we had a legislative subcommittee meeting a week ago today. And so I'm going to pretty much present to you the same information that I presented to them at their meeting. One of the things that the city has been very supportive of over the last 7 years is introducing enabling legislation for an occupancy fee for hotels. Many of you have heard about this, have been involved in this discussion. So the good news is, for the first time ever, the current iteration of the bill came out 10-10 from the committee's recommendation, which means there's been more support historically. I think it was House Ways and Means. It's going to go for a vote, if not next week, the following week. This is also a bill that's supported by the New Hampshire Municipal Association, so it's one of their policy bills. They support any bill, any type of enabling legislation that's going to allow municipalities to generate additional funds. How this is different than the other versions of this bill over the last 7 years is that rather than the fund going towards sort of tourism-related costs, this version of the bill supports our police and fire. So the public services associated with the increase in tourism. And I think that was why maybe it engendered some more support than it had before. I can't really surmise, but some of you know the mayor testified in support of that bill, provided written testimony, and the city and Conway are going to be producing, along with NHMA, a flyer to hand out the day of the vote. So I think from NHMA's perspective, they feel like it's progressed more than it ever has before, so they're hopeful that it's going to gain some traction. So that's one that we will watch very closely to see what happens if it gets out of the House. Obviously, it crosses over to the Senate. I don't really have any information about how the Senate is going to review the bill, but really the House is the hurdle, always has been, for this bill. So that was very interesting this year.
Before you move on from that one, does the bill provide that all the funds collected stay in the community where the facility is located?
Yeah, it has to be enabling legislation for any city or town who chooses to adopt it, and that those funds go towards those public services in that town.
So
The police and fire in Portsmouth.
can you give us a sense of what that looks like? If the city realizes a tax or fees of $1 million, does that go to the police and fire budgets?
I think that would be
Does a percentage of it go to the police and fire?
I think it would have to be earmarked for the specific purpose of supporting those public services. I'm not sure if it has parking in there too. It's been amended a couple of times, but my understanding it would be a specific fund for those purposes, and how that is expended, I think, would be a budget decision. But I don't think it could go into just general fund, general costs. It would have to be earmarked for those public services for safety, those safety services. So that's always the pushback on this bill. It's kind of strange. Who collects it? What's the administrative burden of that? That's always been a hurdle and always been a discussion. But, municipalities collect fees all the time. I mean, so I think maybe after a few hiccups, there'll be some certainty. Not all cities and towns will adopt this, obviously. It'll only be a handful, I would assume, because they just don't have the tourism, business wouldn't be worth their while. So it will be interesting to see, we know that you can identify probably who those towns are, the Lakes regions, the Seacoast, certain places that have, a substantial amount of hotels. The other thing that's interesting that is the mayors of New Hampshire have a group, and they write letters in support of legislation. And so there is a letter coming from most of the mayors in the state supporting this bill. And that will also be attached to the flyer before the vote at the House. So that's an interesting new a group in the last several years during COVID. The mayors were meeting for sharing information about, dealing with COVID. It's evolved into discussions of legislative issues, and they've been very effective in getting a consensus on a handful of bills a year, providing letters of support and testimony for certain bills, and that weighs, that has an impact, particularly in the House, when you have your local elected officials coming and testifying in favor of a bill.
So is it just related to hotels, the occupancy, or is it related to other types of short-term rentals or any kind of other alternative housing?
There is a statutory definition of the, and there's also a number of days limit. So in other words, if, I forget if it's like 30 days, over a certain amount of days, in other words, residency at a hotel won't be included in that. So I think it's a certain number of days. You have to kind of get that threshold, and then the fee can be collected. But it's not intended for rentals or, any sort of long-term capture. It's just the typical fees that we pay when we travel outside of New Hampshire when we go to hotels, that particular one.
I was thinking like the Airbnb type situation. Kind of.
I'll have to reread the statutory definition. I know that industry, right,
in the city.
right, that industry was very involved over the last 7 years in this discussion, as has the hotel lobby, because they, of course, want everyone to be excluded as opposed to just hotels as defined, so.
That was kind of my question. Apart from general legislative sentiment against new taxes, are there any large groups or actions against this at this point in time?
Typically, it is the hotel industry, the tourism lobby is very strong at the State House, and they have traditionally opposed this for various reasons, but just in general. And I haven't been tracking, who has provided testimony on this bill. We'll certainly get another bite at the apple to see if it crosses over the Senate. But traditionally, it has been the tourism industry has not embraced this.
Thank you.
Can you give us the bill number, the House bill
Sure.
number?
It is. Let's see. House Bill 1254.
Okay. And my final question, is the fee a flat amount per night or a
Originally,
percentage?
when the bill was introduced, it was a very broad bill, so it was amended to include a $2 per night,
Okay.
so that they felt there wasn't enough detail to it.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead.
So the next issue, obviously, that's of great concern to the city, is housing. And some of you know Senator Perkins Coker has sponsored the Omnibus Bill, which is a bill that improves zoning procedures to incentivize housing. That's Senate Bill 538. One of the things that you should also know is that there are many, many bills this session that try to do that very thing piecemeal. So let's say, for instance, there are a bunch of bills that want to limit the amount of parking required per bedroom. There are bills that want to provide by right two residency, two family in every single family home in residential units. There are bills that would allow by right 2 accessory dwellings rather than 1. You know, so we as a city have not certainly, you know, endorsed or adopted those. Part of the reason is that you kind of wait to see what filters out, you know, and crosses over with the committee evenly split between the Republicans and the Democrat. A lot of these bills are coming out without recommendation, sort of these 10-10 votes, and so it's. And that was true last year, and it's true this year, but it hasn't been true before. So you kind of wait for things to filter through, and then pick some of those bills that you are in support of. The problem with those types of bills is we have legislative principles that say we generally don't support statewide zoning changes. So these housing issues are, you know, you have to weigh and balance, and the legislative subcommittee does that. Yes, these would be basically statewide zoning changes, but certainly when we are supportive of workforce housing, we can get behind some of these bills because we have 2 principles that sometimes conflict in the language of a bill, but at the same time, you know, we have to kind of weigh and balance as a committee to move those forward. And then we always watch retirement bills because they have a cost to the city. You know, one of the bills that we were watching is the state retirement contribution. As many of you know, the state contributed to employee retirements. There was a one-time 7.5% contribution from the state. Was it 2 years ago? I think it was not last year, but the year before. That wasn't successful last year. It's brought back again, where it would relieve the burden of cities and towns to pay 7.5% of the employees' retirement, and that's something that we would watch very closely, as also any sort of retirement bill that would increase benefit and increase costs to a city. We also watch bills that erode local control. We, as a city, are only allowed to do what the state allows us to do through statute. So when there are bills that come forward that kind of erode the things that are in our control, then we watch that. That's been a trend that's increased, I would say, over the last several legislative sessions. A lot of them are eroding control of health officers, building inspectors, these types of things. And so there's a bunch of bills that we watch carefully that would change what a health officer would be able to or a city would be able to do in response to a health emergency, a public health emergency. And so those are, you know, a bunch of those that we watch closely. There are several building code amendment bills that we're watching, which would basically say a municipality cannot make any changes to the state building code. Traditionally, there's several statutes that say you can make local amendments as long as they're not less strict than the state building code. So those, you know, those impact our development and our all the building, which is segues nicely to my next topic. I didn't plan that. And then, of course, the education funding issue, which is really there are bills that are, I would say, stalled because of the recent decisions in both the Conville case and the Rand case. You know, 30-second elevator speech on those, which are, you know, 40-page decisions. I'll start first with Conville. That is a case that found that the base adequacy, so the base cost per child in the state, was unconstitutionally low. So the judge ordered that the floor for that would be $7,500 per child as opposed to the current $4,000 per child. There was a motion to reconsider that came down the last week, and the judge did not reconsider or stay that order, meaning hold it until it gets appealed to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. How does that affect us? Well, the legislature is now in a position where it rejected a bill that wanted the base adequacy to be $10,000. They didn't vote to move it forward, but that was before the motion on the reconsider from the judge. So we don't really know what the legislature is going to do, whether they're going to amend a bill. There are several that haven't crossed over to increase that base adequacy, and then how are they going to find the money to fund that? I mean, that's almost doubling what is the current adequacy. And as you know, education funding is a very complicated issue, and funding in general for the state is always a challenge. So that is something that is going to be something that we're all going to be watching. Everyone in the state's going to be watching. And that case will be appealed to the Supreme Court, the Conville case. The Rand case is the one where several of the former donor towns, the CC2, Coalition Communities 2.0, I just learned they changed their name, Education Coalition Communities 2.0, so now it's the ECC2, my shorthand and their shorthand for their name. In the Rand case, that was a case that challenged the swept and the excess swept that donor towns, quote unquote, are able to keep. What is excess swept? Again, in a very simple, oversimplified explanation, the state attributes that base adequacy that I just spoke about, how much it costs per child, and does a calculation adding on additional costs per child called differentiated aid if English is a second language, or they are participants in the free lunch program, and so there's a dollar figure per child, and that's multiplied out by your average daily membership of your children, and that is the quote adequacy that the other court found insufficiently low, but we're not going to deal with that now. So that is your adequacy per child. Then the state has to raise $363 million, which is the amount statutorily they have determined to support that adequacy, and then they get the swept rate. They charge that rate to all our property tax, then they raise that 362, and that's funds, quote unquote, adequacy. There are some places that the amount that we raise in that SWAP, it's about $2, most of you see it on your tax bill, is more than that magic calculation for what it costs to educate our kids, our adequacy. So there's some towns that have high property values that have this excess swept. For many years, the donor towns sent that excess swept to Concord to pay for education. Some of you remember that. Some of you were here for those years in the city. And then for the last, I think it's 2011, donor towns have been able to keep that excess swept and use it for their schools. And swept is, it's a shell game. We don't actually send a check to Concord. These are locally raised taxes, but it's the state's, the state has declared that is actually the state's portion of education and a state tax, not a local tax. So anyway, the Rand case says that it's unconstitutional to keep the excess swept. So basically, the order is a return to donor towns. And the reasoning behind that is that taxes have to be reasonable and proportional under our Constitution. They have to be uniform in value and equally applied. So the argument is that if everyone in the state's paying $2 for the swept tax, but there are these certain towns that are keeping the excess, that's really that's really reducing the amount that they are paying. It's kind of artificially reducing that swept portion. So therefore, that tax is not equal. It's not proportional because these donor towns are getting that extra money. So that is also going to be appealed to the Supreme Court, but the judge recently ruled that that order is not staged. So now the DRA, the Department of Revenue Administration, is now not allowed to let donor towns keep that excess. So a lot is happening on that, and the coalition community and their lawyers are very busy, very likely going to be drafting the appeal, and this is going to be in the news, and it's going to affect every town, in the state. So that's something that we're watching too. Taking a lot of your time, but it's important that you know that this is happening. You'll read the newspaper articles. This is something that's going to continue to be an economic impact to the city moving forward. Not immediately, but in the future when it gets applied.
How will that affect Portsmouth?
We will be a donor town, and each year that excess amount is different depending on what the calculation is. So it doesn't. So there's also the problem that DRA is also a creature of statute, and the laws tell DRA what to do. Now we have a court telling DRA what to do, and DRA is like, well, I don't know. They don't know what they're going to do. Where are they going to put these excess swept funds? How are they going to distribute these funds? If it gets overturned on an appeal, what happens to that money? So there was concern by the state and the DRA as to the impact of how actually this is going to happen. And I think that's very likely going to be part of the appeal as well. I think the swept rate for excess, that would be the December tax bill of 2024. So that's not the spring, but the winter one. And again, I don't know if the appeal is going to be expedited. I don't know if that's something the Supreme Court would consider, given that it affects every city and town, the taxes of everybody. So we will know more in the next couple of weeks as far as what's going to be filed and hopefully get some direction from DRA, from Department of Education, from the state as to how this is all going to shake out, as it were. So then, building, development, downtown. Have you noticed there's stuff going on? So there are lots of construction projects happening. And I thought it would be interesting for you to know. You read about sort of the land use boards, and that gets in the paper, but I want you to know what happens after they're approved from the city's perspective and what we do with these development projects, because I find it very interesting, but I think you will find it interesting too. So what happens is, once everything's been approved for the larger downtown developments, the staff meets with the developers, and we have a construction mitigation management plan, and we go over the construction schedule, the utilities, what the impact is going to be on our sidewalks, our streets, and it's a team of fire, police, multi-level staff from DPW, legal, and it's a room about this many folks with the developers and the architects and the engineers, and we go through each element of the development project. One thing that's happened is there's an abutter meeting first off, so they're obligated to give abutters notice and have a meeting and explain, what's going to happen. The next thing that's significant is the construction schedule, obviously, because we need to know sort of what the project's schedule is. This is particularly true, as you might know, because we have multiple projects being constructed near each other right now in the city. So that's why those meetings are important. One of the things we discuss right off the bat is when are you going to deliver things, and when is that going to impact, our roadways, our sidewalks, and the like. So if it's something short-term, they have to do an encumbrance permit. You see flaggers all the time when you're trying to drive through the roads. That's because we require them to get flaggers if they're going to be in our sidewalk or our street. If they're going to really encumber things for longer than 30 days, they have to get a license. A lot of you have been to city council meetings. Council approves licenses. That's when they're on city property for longer than 30 days. They pay fees for that, for the use of city property. Where things are interesting right now in the city, is that there are many projects that are being constructed really along we all know the Foundry Garage, so right across, we call that Lot 6. That's under construction. The lot not immediately next to Foundry, but the two next to that, the corner of Maplewood and the next lot on Deer, where the bank is, that's going to come online soon. We have 238 Deer Street right across the street from there. So you have 4 projects all right around the Foundry Garage. Not to mention Rains Avenue, right across the street, the parking lot there, that's been approved for construction. And then a little bit down the way, you've got Green and Rains Ave, and those are also been approved for development, among many others, 64 Vaughn, 93 Pleasant, so we have lots of construction. What we've done from a staff perspective is we now have weekly meetings with those 4 construction projects near the Foundry to make sure we as a city know what's happening, when the deliveries are coming, and so they themselves can talk to each other to make sure I'm getting my steel on Wednesday, I'm going to be blocking half road, so what are you doing, where are you in your work schedule? So I think it's important for you folks to know that that's what staff does. I mean, that's what a lot of our staff spend a lot of time dealing with these construction projects. Construction is challenging. Construction is difficult. It has an impact. And so nothing is perfect, obviously, but it's important for you to know that we do those things and we try to understand sort of the impact and how each construction project now is going to affect the other. So further licenses will come, potential road closures will come if we feel, that that's the required step we need to take during certain construction. But I just thought that you folks might be interested in knowing sort of the staff piece and the oversight piece, and also, how much is really happening. I know our planning folks have lists of how many housing units are expected to come online as a result of all of these projects, which might be interesting for you folks to hear at another meeting, but that's always very interesting. Most of these are mixed use. Most of these large projects are mixed use projects. Some of them have hotels. Most of them have residence and commercial space. So it'll really change all those lots near Foundry. Most of you know when we went and got the garage and the land for that garage many years ago, all of those were slotted to be constructed way back before construction of the garage. So these are finally coming online after many years. Most of you are familiar. I'm seeing a lot of people shaking their heads. So these are not things that are, although it's new construction, these were sort of contemplated many years ago, but they're all just happen to be being constructed at the same time. In fact, they were supposed to be constructed before the Foundry, many of them, but circumstances changed.
If I can wrap up what Jane is saying, staff is certainly not naive to think that everything will go exactly as planned, and there will be folks, including Sean, working with folks to to, what do you say, over-communicate? and,
Over-communicate. Yes.
And really to mitigate some of the craziness that we know is going to happen. So it won't be perfect. It will be a messy construction season. We will keep people as apprised as we know, and we will have numerous staff working on this.
Questions, Bob?
I'm just wondering how the city piece sort of fits into the whole process. There's a piece of land that the city owns right next to the garage that's going to be developed as a park or something.
Yes, so interestingly, when the garage was negotiated, that is our property, but there were, I believe there were easements that were required as a part of that transaction to allow that to be laid down for construction. Those are what, and that property right now is being used for two, I believe, of I call it Lot 4, the one right next door, and across the street, Lot 6 for
Everything's
laydown.
done.
When everything's done, exactly, when they're gone, then that will be community space for the city.
Do we have any plans for it yet? Any ideas? Not really.
I have seen a plan, but again,
It's going to work, it's going to speak to some art, it's going to be some connectivity to other open space
Yeah.
pieces, and we've got a planned easement work along the railroad, so it's going to be a bit of a mess before our piece settles in. I think we'll plan it around all of that.
Jane, I have a question. We know if you drive around that area where the, basements and footings are being poured, but what other projects are expected to actually start construction this year? For instance, are the Rains Avenue one going to break ground this year, or?
I think so.
Well, I know that 2 Russell, the one across the street from what we'll call
Right.
Ground Zero, has a building permit start deadline of June. So 2 Russell's going to come online, and the former
We
Stady,
anticipate it.
70 Maplewood's up and going.
Up and going.
Lot 6. So there's at least 4, as many as 7. We didn't even mention 53 Green, which is abutting One Range. We can, when they're not out in the field.
Yeah, just thinking.
They may have to give me a
Seems like
report
it's a
that I
whole-
can share.
I was gonna say, it seems like it's a whole meeting just talking.
Yeah, would you get close to your mic, Everett?
Oh,
'Cause-
I'm sorry. I just said, it seems like DPW, we could take a whole meeting, we just have DPW give us an update on
Right.
construction in progress.
Yep. And not to mention the Islington Street corridor will wrap up
Yeah.
this year.
I haven't even talked about Islington or
You're right.
Maplewood.
The DPW projects, the Islington final phase to Maplewood is going to be happening at the same time, as well as the Maplewood Bridge replacement.
Correct.
So if you radiate out from those projects, we have our own that are going to
Right.
be happening. So all that to say, to your point, Everett, yeah, the update's going to be fast and furious and probably more than once a week from a DPW standpoint. And I'll just jump in and say that what I'm going to be doing is attending the DPW staff meetings every Monday morning, so that there's no surprises, and so that I can understand, listen from a business perspective, what needs to be communicated, over-communicated, et cetera. So it's going to be fast and furious, to steal a movie line.
My list has 19. The list I have before me that planning
Wow.
gave me upcoming development: 1169 Sagamore, 3400 Lafayette, 3548 Lafayette, 83 Beverly Hill Road, 93 Pleasant, 70 Maplewood, 1400 Lafayette, 238 Deer, 105 Bartlett, 1 Congress. We didn't mention that one. 53 Green, 1 Rains, 815 Lafayette, 2 Russell, 80 Constitution, 111 State, 581 Lafayette, 1155 Sagamore Ave, 686 Maplewood. And that's 869 more units of housing for those.
Could we get that list sent out after the meeting?
That's from planning. I can
Planning?
ask.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. That doesn't include the Christmas tree shop
No,
No,
with another
Still in
360
planning.
units.
that's right.
still in the land use boards.
Other questions of Jane?
Be interesting to see if there's any affordable units out of those 850.
Yeah, is it possible to track those based on the permits that have been issued?
Yeah, because what would be approved would be in the letters of decision, and if there is workforce housing, if they got a density bonus or something like that, that would be included in the planning would have that information.
That'd be great.
I'm also personally interested in Lafayette, living off of Lafayette. There's a lot of, I know Jen is as well, but there's a lot of construction there, and I'm curious if there's any plans from the state around improvements or egress for Route 1 for that area, given the development.
The Route 1 corridor work is back on, as I understand it. It took a pause before COVID, and now it's back on. Oh, good. The system mayor can weigh in on that because she went to the last meeting.
I'm sitting on the PAC for that. So that project is the PAC has met twice now with a couple of ideas from the DOT, and we'll be planning a public informational session within the next few months. And that is going. The phase of this project, the scope right now is from Ocean to essentially like Hoover, Wilson. Not as far up as some of the construction that is currently happening. But there's a lot of ideas tossing around in that committee, expanding roads, making sure we have
Sidewalks.
bike paths and sidewalks and things like that along. So a full overhaul of that coming, but construction not really starting until 28 construction season.
And PAC is Public Advisory Committee, something like that?
Yes. Yep.
So I'll just say I'm happy to field questions from this group and get information however you want to do it, or invite others to come speak in more detail. But I think, as you can hear, there's just a lot going on. It'll continue to go on, but we're happy to facilitate meetings, reports, information to this group.
Oh, that'd be great. Well, so I think the request is if we could get a list of the ones that will be under construction
Sure.
this year, and to Bob's point, maybe how many affordable units residential units will be part of that.
Great.
Okay, other questions of Jane? Great, Jane, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane.
Good day, everyone.
All right. We'll jump to our new working groups and start with you, Sarah, with the business support.
Yes. So Anna, Bob, Sean, Andy, and myself met to talk about areas of focus for business support. And we narrowed in on two main areas, and team, feel free to jump in if there's anything that I miss. So the first one is around business engagement resources and curation. There was acknowledgement that there's a lot of activity in the city from a business perspective, and folks may not necessarily either know where to go, or there's resources distributed all over the place. So our thought was to do an assessment of what we have for engagement models and collect information, provide resources, and find ways to better engage with Portsmouth's business community. Some ideas that we had thrown out, we have not narrowed down a specific area of focus, was supporting Sean in his quest to populate the CRM system to facilitate business engagement. There's some baseline information in there around businesses in the city, but there may be opportunities to better qualify or survey or reach out to the folks in that system. Looking at digital resources available to businesses, small businesses in particular. Something that I learned that maybe everybody might have already known about, but the Portsmouth Public Library has a small business section with resources for folks to reach out to. So links to the SBA and other things like that. So how do we make, shore up those resources or make sure that folks are aware of what's out there? Partnership with other local business support organizations to promote and support CRM development. We've mentioned SBA and SCORE, which I know we've had folks come to this in the past. The other thought was development of surveys and microsurveys during the course of 2024, where there are particular touch points between businesses and the city. Say a permit is filed, is there an opportunity to reach out after the permit is filed and gather some information or some feedback on the process or metrics on that engagement as well. Entry and exit surveys for businesses that join or leave Portsmouth. What can we learn about why they're coming or why they're going to help develop and craft engagement? And The other open questions we had around this were tying out some of the content and participation from the BRE survey into the CRM. How can we capture some of that information? And then lastly, are there lessons to be learned from surrounding communities around best practices for business engagement that we might be able to tap into? Anything from the team on that we didn't cover? Okay. And then the second item was around permitting process review. I think folks that have been here for a little bit remember we had conducted in 2019 an assessment of the permitting process for the city. How do requests come in? How are they managed? How long do they take, et cetera? And there was some feedback that was received and applied into the system. The question was, how are we doing there? Is there a backlog of requests? Can we look at some additional or updated reporting on the permitting process to have a look and see are there areas of focus or improvement that we need to highlight as well? The other thought, I think, Andy, you had raised this, is that there's a sort of top 10 project list for the biggest projects or the longest duration projects. Is that something that we could capture or get visibility into? I think maybe some of the stuff that Jane Farini shared might be areas of focus for there as well. So this really is a knowledge gathering area to see like what can we learn about the permitting process and are there particular areas of focus. And I know Sean has already done some legwork in both of these areas around getting data, engaging with the team on permitting so that we can have a look at that. Anything folks want to add? Bob?
Just as we were going through the whole process of figuring out what to do, it came, well, I realized, and maybe everyone else, that Sean has a lot to do. And that in looking at other economic development offices in neighboring towns, cities, he's doing the work of probably 3 people. So just, I think that's something to bear in mind as we think about projects and what Sean and his office of one can accomplish. So, and I don't know if there's any appetite for expanding that office, probably not, but just he's doing a lot, whereas most communities would give him a lot more support.
This will be where I mentioned to the EDC that the City Council's budget guidance for the year was no new FTEs unless they were self-funded. So
I'm not suggesting that Sean go out and hire 2 or 3 more people, but certainly he could use them. So I think as long as we're aware of that.
I appreciate it, Bob. And I think the opportunity is what we're doing here with the working groups and leveraging whatever resources we can. And there's a lot going on in other departments that I can tap into and leverage as well. So between that and my big hope, the CRM, there'll be this way for us, the EDC, to move forward with this greater level of engagement with the business community without having to have people running around the streets, which is what other communities do. We have tools. We have.
Perhaps we can be a model for other communities.
Perhaps we can, and license that, and get some revenue. Thank you.
Any questions or anything else to
Yeah.
add?
Okay, that's great. Just to your point, Bob, I would say there is a certain dynamic that we don't want to overburden Sean. On the other hand, we want to go through Sean. We don't want to create a situation where members of this commission are sort of out there pulling on resources, particularly other city departments and employees. So I guess we need to keep that balance in mind when we choose projects. So. Right. Ann.
We started out as the sustainability working group, but the first thing we did was change our name. We're not talking about eco or environmental topics. We already have a committee in the city that does that, and we didn't want confusion. So we are now the Economic Resiliency Working Group. I feel like Sarah, between our 2 working groups, I felt like it came out, you're sort of the micro group and we're kind of the macro group, because you're talking about individual businesses really looking at what business owners and managers are looking for, whereas we're kind of going to look way up high and be more about the climate of doing business in Portsmouth as a bigger picture. So we too were choosing 2 topics with a plan of action that we could present to City Council. We wanted topics that had an outcome with enough support that we don't come up with something that just ends up on a shelf and nothing happens. And we needed it to be doable in 2024. So not too broad of a topic. So our first topic is the electrical grid in Portsmouth, the infrastructure. I feel like anecdotally we hear about these lots. Stady comes to mind, that it's hard for a developer to buy that lot and be successful because they have to pay to upgrade the electrical. And what does that mean? Like, we don't quite know. So the first thing we're doing on electrical grid is trying to educate ourselves on what is the current state of affairs in Portsmouth. So we're going to set up meetings. Karen is our facilitator. It's Jen and Jacob and Karen, but Karen's our kind of liaison with people in City Hall and people on the outside. And we're going to hear from Peter Rice and is it Mike Busby from Eversource to understand what is here, how does that affect the developer. The way it's set up now, is it favoring our really large developers and not allowing the small development to happen? We don't really know. Or is it a problem? That we don't know either. Maybe it's not a problem, in which case we'll say there's not a problem here and let's move on to the other topic. So that's our digging in right now, is figuring out what this is, what's the role of the city, what can we offer to City Council on this electrical infrastructure, and kind of the side tangent is, does this affect housing? Is this one of the things that affects housing, particularly in our downtown quadrant? So that's our topic number 1. Topic number 2 is transportation, and one of the things we like about that is also one of the 5 goals of City Council, to look into transportation. So there will become, and I guess, Sean, we need to understand how we let council know that we're on it. So they have a goal and we're doing research on it, so we need to.
We can rely on the 2 council reps.
Okay, there you go. Joe Kelly,
Joe.
you're on. So we're taking that on, and we're specifically looking at microtransit, trying to understand it, benchmarking communities that have it. We've found some communities that have been very successful with it. We've found some communities that have adopted it and not been successful. So we're going to interact with those communities, understand why. We're going to interact and hear from Coast and from, who is it here? Ben Fletcher here in Portsmouth. They'll help us understand what's in place and what their future is of the transportation. What do they have in their pipelines that we might not be aware of? So that'll be our deep dive there, benchmarking, making suggestions, understanding what happens. And that's our 2 topics. So inputs, we'd be happy for, even if you're not on our committee. Yeah, throw us things.
I'm also personally interested in transportation, so happy to hear that that's one of your areas of focus. I think one of the, and I know it's still early days, one of the proposals with the redevelopment of the Christmas tree lot was around some sort of public-private partnership around microtransit. Are you planning on studying either those public-private partnerships elsewhere or opportunities for Portsmouth? And then does there need to be any sort of enabling legislation or policy around inclusion of transportation options for these large developments?
All of it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm really interested in the Christmas tree shop, watching that progress. It was a good presentation. It looks like a good project. How's that going to progress down the line in the planning department, and then as it moves through boards, what will that look like?
Yeah, that did come up at the planning board for the conceptual consultation conversation with that project.
They'd be a perfect candidate for microtransit,
Sure.
but we don't want them to have their own little private microtransit. You know, what would be great is to have this
Tie into
broader
something else.
thing that's tied in, and that's what we'll hear from Coast. Like, are there any thoughts
To
of
what degree can we require either inclusion or contribution? Or I'm just interested in what the incentive model is to make sure that that's part of.
I mean, Coast technically already has microtransit, but it's the paratransit model, so they have an on-demand, like, I don't know if it's vans or what it is, but they have an on-demand transit model for people with disabilities. So there's already the tiny speck of it there.
And we're going to look into best practices in this realm from things that have worked, Wilson, North Carolina,
Wilson,
things that
North
have not
Carolina
worked.
works. Newton, Mass had a good one going, and they've pulled back. So there's two that we
Trying to
can
learn from others.
I'd like to hear about failures too. Why aren't they successful?
Bob?
Yeah, I think that's great because we've always talked about connectivity between different areas of the city. And we did have, remember we had a proposal from a micro transit company?
That was our last meeting before the pandemic.
Yeah,
Right.
is that something we can?
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Is that something we can dig up or find out
I
who
can go
did
back
it?
to my
or-
notes and see who
I
presented.
don't know if that
There's
company
some
is still
big
around.
providers. VIA is the big provider that seems
Yeah, we
to
had a
be
whole
in
proposal for
so many
the
cities.
city to buy into the thing. It was, it wasn't cheap, I don't think. But,
can imagine.
At least gave us an idea of what we're dealing
I'll
with.
see what I can find and make sure that you get it in, and
Okay.
Sean as well,
That
from
would be
what we
great.
had covered in our last.
Can I just add in that our group had a sensitivity to making sure that what we were talking about had relevance and meaning to the entire city, not just the downtown, not just the
Yeah.
obvious corridors, but that will be a continued focus.
Exactly. Yeah, we did. I'll look through my records as well, because we actually
Yeah,
had a
I will
person come
too.
in and present
I probably have a
on one
file
for Portsmouth, and they had experience with other communities. I think there was one.
Probably
It was
2019.
December 2019 or January 2020. It was
So right before.
Yeah, exactly. That was when there was some thought that the development of McIntyre would result in an annual contribution toward the cost
Oh, I do
of
remember
this
that.
program. So I think as you do this, one outcome may be a recommendation that the incentives that are built into the zoning ordinance that allow for increased density include a transportation contribution. And apropos of this, 20 years ago, Portsmouth had a development standard that said that in lieu of parking requirements, you could contribute toward the city's parking fund. Now, I think we outgrew
Right.
that, but that would be a potential model. Other questions of Ann? That's great. I think both the working groups are heading in the right direction. All right, so let's jump to our regular liaison reports. Actually, why don't you,
I think we're going to lose the assistant mayor soon, so given our transit schedule, if she's still there.
Yes, I'm still here.
would
Do
you like
do
to give
mind
us
if
a
I-
city council report?
Yes. I want to start off by saying that if any of the subgroups or the EDC would like information conveyed at a city council meeting, I'm more than happy to put it in under my name. It just has to be submitted to me so I can submit it to the city clerk's office the Wednesday before the meeting by noon. Happy to do that, to get things out in the council realm and in public during a city council meeting. Going back to last week's session, we had our school business administrator, Nathan Lenny, who is really amazing, got named this New Hampshire School Business Administrator of the Year. As many people saw, we had a robust public comment session with a lot of people speaking in favor of a ceasefire resolution. We had the public hearing and adoption of amending the elderly and disabled tax credit, bringing it up to the cost of living increases. What else? As we talked on, we adopted the outdoor design standards that were brought forward from the EDC, and we adopted the outdoor permit fee. What else? Oh, the big thing that I'm really excited about is we have finally reestablished the mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee for the Housing Committee. So we will be looking at the development of the Sherburne School property as the Lister Academy project comes on board over at Community Campus. We will also be looking, our mission statement is bigger than that. We'll be looking at payment in lieu of programs and kind of looking at models in other communities for that. we will be looking at some of the proposed zoning changes that were brought up from the land use board that are still going through the planning board.
They actually got recommended for approval last night, Assistant Mayor, back to council.
Perfect. That's great. And I'm really excited about that because a couple of our members are coming from the Portsmouth Listens group, which, as most of you know, we had a informational working session in conjunction with the planning board to hear some of the report outs from the Portsmouth Housing, the Portsmouth Listings Housing Study Circle. Sorry about that. And a lot of what I took away from that was people saying we need to build affordable below market and workforce housing. And so a lot of those people are joined on this committee, which is really great. 2 councilors brought forward a request to look at the redesign of State Street, turning that into a 2-way. And then I think we are working on the working group, getting the working group together for the Market Square Master Plan. And I think that is pretty much it. Anything else, City Manager, that you think I missed?
You got everything.
Okay.
Assistant Mayor, one question regarding the State Street project. What will
Yes.
be the public input process for that project?
That is a great question. I would look to the city manager. Right now it's requested that just the CIP sheet be drawn up and included in the packet for Monday to look at a State Street redesign as an amendment to the CIP.
So what I can add to that
really,
if it's helpful.
Yes.
So the request was to drop an element sheet to be added to the CIP. So DPW did that. They're estimating $500,000 and then $1.5 million. And the estimates are low. They're very conservative. It is staff's recommendation that the State Street consideration be part of what will be discussed as part of the Market Square Master Plan. So for up to us, we think proposing a CIP element sheet is premature until such time as a plan is worked out in and around how Market Square is reimagined. So that's why we hadn't included one. There were councilors who asked for one. So if it passes, we'll have to move it forward, and if it doesn't, it would be incorporated into the Market Square work that's going to start in the next couple of weeks because the vendor's been selected, and we're going to start in earnest on that.
Okay. Well, I think that would be something that this commission would be definitely interested in.
Right. The mayor likes the idea of setting up a working group to support that effort, work with the staff and the consultant, and my recommendation to him was that there be EDC representation on that group.
Okay. All right. Other questions of the assistant mayor? Thank you, Adriana.
Okay, thank you guys so much.
Travel safe.
All right. Sean, would you like to finish your report beyond the outdoor dining?
Sure, thank you. So just to let you all know, the 2023 cultural plan will be reviewed by City Council on Monday night, and based on that expected approval, that will go to print. And a reminder that is going to be handled by the new Arts and Culture Commission, and it's a way to look out 5 to 10 years and protect and enhance our arts and culture scene here in Portsmouth, with a goal of it also informing the 2035 master plan. So all these plans eventually line up and inform the master plan. I mentioned the DPW that I'll be attending the meetings on Monday mornings. You heard a lot from Jane, but there's certainly going to be many more updates. In terms of the parking utilization study group that I've been attending, just wanted to let this group know where that is at. If you're following along, the parking principles from 2012 were reviewed and refined. The current state assessment has been done by the consultant. Then there was some analysis on formulas and what does it really mean to kind of test what they saw and in terms of our needs. There was public input on parking. And now they're going through, they've done some benchmarking with similarly sized cities. And the next thing really you'll see come out will be the future needs, and there'll be proposals and more public input. But that has been moving along the whole time, and there is a citizen advisory group as well as members of the staff outside of DPW and outside of parking that participate in that. Okay. There was a question about CIP. At our last meeting, the CIP adoption is on the City Council docket for Monday night, so if you have interest in that. Talked about the CRM a little bit. I do have a meeting today with the vendor and our IT department to make sure things will work and within the city IT infrastructure. And the last thing, just on the Market Square master plan, we do have the internal group has a meeting next Friday where we're going to be meeting with the consultant, and to city manager's point, the mayor will then make some decisions on an advisor group, a larger group, to be part of that process. Right now, the time frame is that the consultant will complete their work by the end of calendar year 24. So that's gathering all the public input and taking a look at what we've asked them to do in the RFP. So just to kind of give you a timeline on that. So that's what I have from my office. I'm happy to answer any questions on the EDC calendar notes we received that I'll be putting out. And I do want to just a couple of reminders. So I'll wait. I can speak to Ben.
Well, first of all, any questions? I'm curious as to, because I know the parking update has been ongoing now for at least 6 months, if not a year. And have they taken into consideration the current or soon to commence construction projects in the northern tier?
Yeah, DPW is involved, planning and sustainability is involved, in addition to the parking group. So all of that, all the information is brought to bear.
Yes.
It just seems there's going to be a lot of new cars in the downtown area within like 2 years. So, Everett?
Tom, the article in the paper, maybe day before yesterday, on the delays in the Hanover garage, it was unfortunate. I read the article and specifically looking for some reference to, the Foundry garage is there to pick up, the excess, and the car should be redirected there. And it was, the writer, the editor didn't think to put that in there, and the mayor may have suggested it, but if you're the reader of that, you think, well, the city's got this problem with parking, and I thought, oh my God, what a great opportunity for us. And
it wasn't for lack of mentioning.
I'm sure it
I
wasn't.
listened to Monty talk to the reporter.
Okay,
so
good.
I'm
sure it wasn't. It was
right.
just, if you're again a reader, you're thinking,
Yeah.
oh my God, here's our garage sitting there 2 blocks away.
Yep.
Yep. Well, we can't control what the paper.
No, that's right. We can just reinforce
What
it.
we are going to do from a staff and a logistics perspective is sign things better, put out on the sidewalk, have the venues that tend to bring in the larger crowds, especially on Friday, Saturday nights, recommend that their patrons use Foundry or some of the other outlying lots, and not
Do
to
we
rely
still
on
have
Hanover.
in the, when we first opened, we had those signs, the electronic signs that were, as soon as you came into the city,
Right.
parking, and there was a directional to send people down to Foundry.
Yep.
When we don't
use
have them
those.
deployed at other sites, we do use them for that purpose still.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of notes I'll mention from Ben, and I think you all received an email. But, all of their events continue to be very well attended, but the ones that are coming up, the elected officials reception, hopefully you all received that invitation, and many of you can make that. That's on the 11th at 4:30 at the 110 Grill. And then the State of the State with Governor Sununu is the next morning, the 12th of March, at the Atlantic Grill. And a quick note that the Spring Restaurant Week signups, there's 29 restaurants signed up so far. and that's a slight increase from the fall. So just things continue to track very positively from a chamber standpoint. And I think we've talked about in the past that all indications are that we're going to have a strong tourism season. Most people are feeling bullish about it in terms of hospitality folks, and not only hotels, but all the businesses that service our tourists. So.
Questions of Sean? Okay, that's all our reports. I don't have any new business, so,
Well,
Ann?
sort of vaguely, maybe this is piggybacks on to you. You forwarded the invite from Gino Marconi to come see.
Oh, yes.
Come
We
in
have a
tomorrow.
ship
I've
coming
gone
in.
twice now to see, once I had a tour from him, and once I went and watched a ship come and dock at his invitation. He's a great tour guide down there. If you haven't been there when a ship is doing its thing,
Yeah, I was going to ask.
now the weather's getting nicer.
Say this tomorrow.
It's in on Saturday, and it's here for 3 or 4 days.
And so it's a salt ship. And
a salt
so I
ship.
responded to that, and then he replied and said, and if that doesn't work, there's a big ship coming on March 15th that's unloading a 328-ton condenser that's going to Eversource. And he said that will be very dramatic watching that come off the
328
ship. So there's
tons.
going to be a lot of opportunities, and the weather's getting better.
Did you just give him a call and?
Yeah, he says, just call me. He's a phone call guy. If you email him,
Right.
that might take a while, but if you call him, he picks right up. You go into the office, there's parking, you go into the office and check in, and they'll get you into a reflective yellow thing.
Hard hat.
He didn't give me a hard hat.
No?
But you
Well,
have to be
Can I
with-
request one?
Yeah, and you all were.
But it's cool to go and watch it happening.
And I made a note to myself to check in with Gino and Miles over there, because they have made improvements to the terminal. They expect
have, recent.
more different, larger, more diverse cargo. So the opportunity is going to continue to
State,
come.
not city.
Right.
But at the same time, I didn't realize till I toured that that's construction projects here in the city will rent land from him, square footage, as their laydown. When they had, oh my God, I don't remember, 80 concrete trucks doing the pour at Hearth Market, and they sat at the terminal. They rented space, they sat at the terminal, and then got one by one called down to that space. So it's a big player in some of these big construction projects if you don't have a laydown space. So it does impact directly development here in the city.
Absolutely.
He's cool. He's an interesting tour.
Definitely.
Did you
Okay.
get a sense of how the cruise ships will dock and embark? And,
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a spec.
I think that would be
It's a tiny spec.
interesting to see.
That's why I went the first time. Like,
Yeah.
show me how this is going to work. And 2 hours later, I knew a lot more than
Yeah,
cruise
that's
ships. He'll give you the full everything. Yeah, the cruise ships will have pretty low impact at that
Right.
port. They're tiny, and they'll have a golf cart that drives back and forth there. I'll call it the tarmac. I don't know what you call
Gangway.
it.
Right, the terminal, yeah, they literally
Terminal.
cannot walk across
They cannot
that.
walk
They have to
from
be
their ship
transported.
to the sidewalk. They'll have a little golf cart driving them back and forth because it's a working port. You can't
Yep.
walk unescorted there.
Right.
All right. So I will open it up to public comment. He's back.
But I'll be gone next month, Tom, so you're in good shape. Again, David Choate. I just had a couple of clarifications on what Jane said. Obviously, housing is the number one issue for the Realtors Association, and people like Bob and Andy are heavily involved in that. Just to clarify the comment she made about single-family being allowed to have become a duplex, that would have to be in an urban core district. So it's not like you're going to go to the Woodlands and all of a sudden take your house and make it into a duplex. ADUs, a couple of very interesting things happening, which I think are very important. The first one would be allowed by right, and the second one would have to, I think it's a conditional use permit, but I might be wrong on that. And the other thing that's, I think, very important for some lots is it can be detached, doesn't have to be attached. And I know in Rye, where I am, and I think in Portsmouth too, there are a bunch of historic homes that would love to have ADUs, but they don't want to attach them to their house, but they have enough land to put it like behind the house, and so this would allow that. So we just keep an eye on that, and you know, even though this bill got, a split decision, if you will, at a committee. There's a lot of heavy lifting still to be done on the omnibus bill, but it's obviously the number one priority in the state of New Hampshire. Every day there are articles about the lack of affordable housing. So I'll be interested also to see how many of those 800 units that have been approved in Portsmouth are affordable. My guess is 0, but there may be a few. I'd be pleasantly surprised if there's more than a couple. I've never seen anybody doing that. Because, anyway, you've heard enough on that. I've kind of given up on that drum. And I was interested in Sarah's comment about the Route 1 Lafayette Road, because I'm actually, even though Andy sold the property to the developer and the WHEB, to my knowledge, there really weren't any extraordinary requirements of them for access and egress. And if you're going to live in there with, 300 units or something, it's going to be a nightmare getting out of there. Everybody's going to go north, I guess it would be, right? You're not going to cut across and go left.
They do, but
Yeah, but I mean,
They shouldn't.
yeah, then you run into the Dunkin' Donuts people going in, right? You have I just was pretty amazed that the planning board didn't really knuckle down on that one, but and make them come through that other plaza, Lafayette Plaza. Anyway, just a couple of comments. I've missed you all. I've told Tom it's been so long, he's now the chairman.
Be careful if you leave again.
That's right, thank you.
Just to clarify, I think that HEB project is only 72.
We're down to 74.
Yeah, 74 units.
Yeah,
not-
but whatever it is, it's going to be fun getting in and out of there.
Okay.
It's a tough lift.
Other public comments? Steve?
I just wanted to say that I'm a writer for indepthnewhampshire.org. I don't know if you've been to that site, but it's a pretty good news site. And in the future, Tom just told me that he's going to be away for a couple of weeks, so I want to talk to you first, and we'll get something started and get it in print at indepthnewhampshire.org about everything you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't have to wait for me, you can type to Sean. All right, so I think that concludes today's meeting. Just to confirm, our next one is here in Conference Room A on April 5th. And since last month, we have, Sean has set up our August meeting at the PDA, so we'll be meeting with Paul Breen and get a report on what's going on out there. And we're off and running, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you all.